The 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint continues with our 2024 mock draft today here. What the Dolphins could do with some of my other moves building up to the draft to help field as complete and talented and as promising of a long-term roster as possible this upcoming season.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I am your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tip of the cap to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase on last-minute tickets. Lowest prices guaranteed. Today on the show, we are almost done with the 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint. And if today's the first day you've had a chance to clock in, welcome, but I got bad news for you. You got to go back and you got to watch Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday because we covered salary cap compliance. The Dolphins are well on their way with some of the decisions that they have made thus far in actuality this offseason. We did free agency class, both the internal members of the Miami Dolphins and external members for what my draft or my free agent class would be for bringing talent into the fray for Miami. And then yesterday was the big conversation, the Tua Tagovailoa contract discussion. ESPN's Adam Schefter had a report yesterday that move may take some time, but the expectation is it will be done before training camp. And that's an important note because throughout the timeline of this offseason blueprint, I have not baked the Tua Tagovailoa extra cap space as a necessity for any of the moves that were made. So free agents that have been added, player cuts, all that kind of stuff. Salary cap compliance exists with this. This would be my draft class. And what I've done is I use one of the many mock draft simulators that are out there. # no free pub though. And I had everything else aligned. I used a bunch of the simulators a bunch of times to figure out which one I thought gave me the best experience. And then I plugged in and I said, all right, this is it. This is the draft. And whatever happens, happens. Whatever players are on the board are on the board. Whatever players are off the board are off the board. It's not really up to me. I'm going to make the best decisions I can with what I am at mercy with this simulation. We're going to go over the results of that mock draft, complementing the free agency moves from Tuesday on the offseason blueprint as well. So final reminder, I like to start every show in the offseason blueprint with this. This is my best effort based on what we understand is the objective and the direction the team is committed to this offseason to maximize the roster for 2024 and the resources with what are at the Dolphins' disposal. So let's get into the 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint by starting about the needs. We touched on this briefly yesterday, or I guess on Tuesday. The needs for this team going into the draft. The team has pre-Tua Tagovailoa contract extensions after their free agent class, the top 51. You have about $2.5 million in cap space at your disposal. The nice thing about that, you don't have to sign the rookies until after, like, you have the rookies' rights. So it's not as though you go through the draft and you're like, okay, we have $2.5 million to sign our rookies. Hope we can fit it in, because you have teams that routinely extend out into the summer to formally sign the contract with their rookie players. But the needs for this team, based off the free agency moves that I've made, the two most pressing needs that the team has is a starting interior offensive lineman and a starting interior defensive lineman. You have Aaron Brewer and Damian Lewis as starters on the interior offensive line that have come into the fray here. But that third spot is still a need. The interior defensive line, Christian Wilkins, has walked in free agency, presumably off to greener in the way of cash pastures pun intended, I suppose. Raekwon Davis was not a part of my replacement plan either. Now, the team got Fali Fatukasi in free agency, but it's Zach Sealer, Brandon Peely, Fali Fatukasi. You need a starter there. The secondary needs edge rusher. You have Andrew Van Ginkel back as a part of my offseason blueprint plan. Again, I go over all of these moves on Tuesday if you missed that show. Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, obviously your star players there. They're coming back off of injuries that were season ending. Andrew Van Ginkel is brought back. I also signed Marquise Haynes Sr. in free agency. I think he's ideally a fifth guy, though, just a rotational guy. A third wide receiver. The wide receiver room has been gutted. Part of the offseason blueprint included Devin Duvernay and bringing back River Craycraft, but Duvernay is more of a special teams weapon than he is a volume player in the passing game. So you still need somebody you feel like him. And Ezukama could be that player, but do you totally want to put your eggs in that basket? I'm not sure that I do. I'd rather have a hedge and more competition. And then ancillary needs, amongst other needs, like punter. I don't have a punter on the roster right now. That's a need. Running back competition, secondary depth, both at corner and safety. Those are kind of your needs going into the mock draft. And the first thing that I knew going in was I wanted to use a simulator that offered you trades. Because I knew going in, I had a short list of players. And we'll go through that list when we actually do like our pre-draft build-up. But I had a short list of about 8 players that if any of them were on the board, it would be difficult to trade down away from those talents. It's a bit of buzzkill because I do want to add more draft picks. Adding more draft picks is like the 1B priority for this draft of my mentality going in. Because again, as the team kind of transitions and they get ready for the next era and generation of big contracts with players that they drafted to get those contracts, good example is Christian Wilkins leaving is not necessarily, they're giving out a quarterback contract. It's, we got Jalen Phillips and Jalen Waddle and Javon Holland all coming up. And our timeline to transition away from the contracts of Xavier Howard and Bradley Chubb and Jalen Ramsey and Teron Armstead, like those all aren't going to happen at once because there's exit ramps on those contracts that make sense to use at different times. So you can feather and layer the contracts over top of each other. But to do them all at once, it's too much dead cap. So you do need to kind of create the spike in draft capital. And I had a listener who pointed out to me yesterday, was chatting with me and said, hey, I don't know if you noticed, but last 3 years, Dolphins have made 7 day 3 draft picks, and 5 of them have been 7th round picks. And to be fair, with the state of what the roster was, a lot of those picks, 5th, 6th round, probably would not have made the Dolphins roster. Case in point, they used one on Elijah Higgins last year, and he didn't make the roster, and everybody was bummed out he got claimed off waivers. That's just, you got a good team, contrary to popular belief or what some people would have you believe about the Dolphins roster. Now, the challenge is to ride the wave of the transition to extend your window in which you can be competitive and not have the floor drop too low. And that's what they're trying to accomplish, and that's what the blueprint is trying to accomplish, with me doing it to the best of my ability as well. So a long way of saying I knew I wanted a simulator that offered trades because I was going to field offers unless there was a no-brainer talent that was available and on the board for me to pick with that pick at number 21 overall. What did we actually get? What's the range that made sense for me to come down off of? I'm glad you asked. That's next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins as we get ready to unveil our mock draft class for the 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint. Make sure that you stick with us. Passion, drive, and patience are what brings home the winning trophy, but they are also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're in a speed, power, style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the dub. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guarantee fit available only to U.S. customers. If you are somebody who loves the spontaneity of going to a game, hockey game, the Panthers are red hot, active with trades. The Heat, red hot. Big surprise. It's February, March, and the Heat and the Panthers are warming up. Get down to the stadium and watch a game. Gametime has you covered. They are the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase, and they are obsessed with finding you ways to save money on tickets. You can see the view from your seat before you buy. They have upfront prices, so there's no surprises when you put that ticket into your cart and then go to checkout. You can find flash deals and sponsor deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and much more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Game Time today for last-minute tickets. Lowest prices guaranteed. So let's get into the draft, right? The draft is done. I've got the graphic all set up. But I would like to spoil this by saying I did trade down. I did have an offer that I thought was particularly attractive in trading down. And the offer included going to the Arizona Cardinals spot at 27 overall, courtesy of the Houston Texans. And when you look at this first round order, I wasn't overly inclined to move all the way out of the first round. But I do think there's a few spots that have surplus picks that Miami can look at and say, hey, this might be a team that's willing to play ball with us. The offer I got from Arizona was 27 overall, so down 6 spots for pick number 90 and pick number 30, 137. So you get 3 and a 4 to move down 6 spots from 21 to 27. Dolphins get that deal in real life. Man, you're getting an extra top 100 pick. You're getting 137, which you compare with 157 to potentially get up into the top 120 if you wanted to. You could tap into future draft capital to combo and parlay that pick. You can trade down out of one of those other picks on day 2 and really create the spike. It's not hard to get mid-round draft capital starting in about the 3rd or 4th round. You just got to make the plunge. The challenge is finding the right value for trading down in the first round. So I say all that to say my short list of players who I thought would be slam dunks to take at 21, I didn't get them. They were gone. The board did not break well, and I don't think the combine really helped with that either. I think a lot of the players I'd love to see available at 21 had good combine performances to kind of reaffirm their status as players. So I took the trade to go from 21 to 27 for 90 and 137. Arizona, as a potential trade partner, they are rolling in it because of their moves from this past year. They have the Texans' first-round pick. They have 35, 66, 71 from Tennessee. They have 90 from Houston. They have 105, 137. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the top 100 and 7 in the top 105. And they're sitting 6 spots behind Miami, where potentially there's a player that might make sense that would get them excited. That's a good combo. The other team to watch is Detroit, I think, at pick number 29. That's 8 spots back. They don't have the same surplus as Arizona, but they do have 2 threes, courtesy of the TJ Hawkinson deal. So that's a team that might be willing to part with a 3 because they have 2 to jump up and be a little bit more aggressive, whether that's a wide receiver or a defensive lineman or something else. So those are the 2 spots I had my eye on going in, and sure enough, I get the offer in the simulator from Arizona and I go down. So what did I do with it? What did we do with this draft pick? Well, I didn't even address a primary need because the draft class at pick number 27 was Darius Robinson, defensive end from University of Missouri, and nobody has greater Charles Harris PTSD than me. I promise you that. Because when that draft in 2017 rolled around, Joe Marino, my co-host on Locked On NFL Scouting, asked me in the elevator on the way to where we were doing the broadcast that night, worst case scenario, pick a 22. Who is it? I said, Charles Harris. I did not skip a beat. Was not a fan of his game. It's a different player. It's a different scheme. We'll talk about him in a minute. But I'll run you through all the picks. Pick number 55, Miami's organic pick in the second round. A starter on the offensive line, in my mind. Christian Hayes, offensive guard, University of Connecticut. Pick number 90, which came courtesy of that trade back with Arizona from 21 to 27. Wide receiver Malachi Corley, Western Kentucky. We'll talk about all these players, but I do want to introduce them first. And then came the other big move that I made. I went out and made a deal. And I got another top 100 pick. And I used pick 137, which was a fourth-round draft selection that I got in the trade back from Arizona. And I paired it with a 2025 third-round pick. And you might say, Kyle, that's ridiculous. Nobody would do that. This exact same trade almost happened 2 years ago. The Carolina Panthers sent 137, the same pick, and a third-round pick in the next year's NFL draft for 94 overall to draft Matt Corral, the quarterback, out of Ole Miss. Now, sometimes process versus results. You went up and got a quarterback. Corral's out of the league already. This is the 2022 draft. That's not great. But the point being, I went up from 137 to 91 because there was two players when I picked at 90 that had my eye, one of which was Malachi Corley. And the other which was that need position at interior defensive line. McKinley Jackson, the defensive tackle from Texas A&M, the pick at 91. So the top 100 picks, I ended with 4 top 100 picks, courtesy of the trade down from 21 to 27. And then utilizing the last of those picks I got in that trade back with a future 3. And the nice thing about what Miami's offseason looks like and the way that we've drawn this up is you can get to a point, you could get a compensatory third-round pick for Christian Wilkins walking in free agency. So you may have 2 third-round picks, and based on how free agency shakes out, they're going to kind of understand if they have 2 to work with or not. Even if they don't, you can move down a few spots in the first round next year and get that pick back. So Darius Robinson, defensive end, good hedge on the injuries along with Andrew Van Ginkel, puts Marquise Hayes at the edge 5 spot. Christian Hayes, you get your third interior offensive line starter to go along with Damian Lewis as your 2 guards and Aaron Brewer as your center. Malachi Corley, kind of your is Ezukanma hedge. His nickname is the Rack King. McKinley Jackson, a 325-pound interior defensive lineman who once upon a time was regarded because of his recruiting profile as a potential first-round pick. He hasn't fulfilled that. But the body type at 6'1.5", 320 pounds fits the Anthony Weaver nose tackle type of build. And then Miami has all 4 of their organic picks currently scheduled, one of which came from Chicago with the Dan Feeney trade, on day 3. 157 is running back Isaac Guerrero, who was a monster performer at the 2024 NFL Combine. This was like one of the best combine performances of all time type of good. 4.33, 41.5-inch vert, 10.9 broad, sub 7-second 3-cone drill, which is outrageously good at 6 foot, 220 pounds. Formerly at University of Wisconsin, transfers to Louisville, never really had the production that came together, but holy cow, what an athletic profile to get at 157 for a 220-pound back. Florida State defensive back Jerrion Jones at 186. The Dolphins get their punter in Torrey Taylor, a multi-year All-American, the University of Iowa at pick 200. And let's be honest, what positional player are you going to pick at 200 that probably makes the roster? Not many. Draft a specialist here. It's a good spot. And then at 239, Tip Ryman, tight end from University of Illinois, a little bit more of a traditional inline player, perhaps a developmental Durham Smythe replacement player. Wouldn't expect he makes the roster, but he plays in line. He can block. He could pass protect. That's my draft class. I ended with 8 picks. 27th, the 4 top 100 picks is obviously the centerpiece of this. Darius Robinson, pick 27, defensive end. Christian Haynes, guard, University of Connecticut. Malachi Corley, wide receiver, Western Kentucky. And McKinley Jackson, defensive tackle. That's the draft class. And there were 2 trades that helped facilitate that, one back in the first round, one up from the 4th round, which you got courtesy of the trade back in the 1st round. So all this stuff obviously moves together. You have to have dance partners in real life. I understand that. But it's a hypothetical run through kind of the available talent in certain ranges. There's players I was bummed that I missed. I really wanted Roman Wilson, the wide receiver out of University of Michigan. But Christian Hayes there was too good to be true. So we'll talk a little bit more about each one of these players in the full draft class, and then our projected June 1st starting lineup, pre-June 1st starting lineup, next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim is as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from date of the first 3% match. You must keep Robinhood Gold IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC. Member SIPC is a registered broker-dealer. So our jaunt through the 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint continues here on Locked On Dolphins with a draft class that I'm a big fan of. I like the talent that was acquired. Didn't necessarily address the most pressing of needs for the first pick with Darius Robinson. But let's talk about Darius Robinson. His selection at pick number 27. You need about $2 million in cap space to sign all of these guys in year 1, by the way, as top 51. Darius Robinson originally played inside, kind of a hybrid defensive lineman type, can kick in the B gap, can rush outside. He cut weight prior to this past season and then posted 8.5 sacks and 14 tackles for loss. He had a monster glow up playing on the outside, but a big time, like heavy-handed, long-armed, prototype build, explosive player. I think that's the thing that really stood out to him. So he came into the combine at 6'5", 285. A little bit of a different cat than Andrew Van Ginkel on the edge, right? But he had 34.5-inch arms. And he tested well enough. Now, he didn't test great in the 40-yard dash. It was a 4.9. He ran a 4.9. But the lower body initial explosiveness, a 35-inch vert, and a 9'3" broad jump for a player of his stature at 285 pounds is really, really good lower body explosiveness. And you watch him on tape, and you watched the success that he had when he played more against tackles. And there were times where he's lined up on inside shoulder tackles, and that left him open to more double teams and all that kind of stuff. But you watched him this year and where he was able to isolate on offensive tackles and really abuse them with his power. And power rush is a good way to translate to the NFL because it's about reducing angles as compared to having to play at steep angles. But the length here, this is everything that Jalen Phillips is. Now, not quite the same athletic profile. Bradley Chubb, they've gone after the last few years, big-bodied edge guys. And if this is a guy that kind of stays in the range where he's at and he can rush inside at times, it leaves you a chance to get your best 4 rushers on the field. And there's a developmental curve here, which gives you a chance to tap into, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, the exit ramp on the Bradley Chubb contract, even after we restructured him in the blueprint this year for more cap space. Really, really promising player that got put into a position this past year that allowed him to be a more successful player. And you take that and you foil that with Christian Haynes from University of Connecticut. And he is a really, really good fit for the the zone system that Miami is expected to run. Christian Hayes is really effective getting out of the blocks. He's really effective climbing to the second level. They ran a lot of outside zone, and he got up onto linebackers effectively. He's a plus athlete, but he's also 6'2" and 310. So you think about a shorter statured quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa, and I think that's an interesting subplot when you consider Robert Hunt was a 6'5" right guard, and Tua is 6'1", right? And Liam Eichenberg is a former college tackle. Liam Eichenberg is 6'6". You got Connor Williams, who is a former, you guessed it, college tackle who's playing center. He's 6'5". So you got these bigger bodied players inside amidst a shorter quarterback versus Damian Lewis is 6'2". Christian Hayes is 6'2". Aaron Brewer is not the same stature either. He's 6'1". So you're getting players that are more proportionate to the height of your quarterback to kind of help your quarterback work that area of the field so long as they're properly engaging with defensive line. Malachi Corley, really, really dynamic with the ball in his hands. And that's really what so much of this offense it aspires to be about. He had a monster year in 2022 with Bailey Zappi. Caught 101 balls for 1,300 yards and 11 touchdowns. And a lot of that work came after the catch in that college spread. Now, without Bailey Zappi, still had a good season. He played 2 less games, so the production was down. Still had 11 touchdowns. His yards per touch was about the same, 12. But he had just short of 1,000 yards on 79 catches versus 101 for 1,300 in 2022. It's the build, 5'11", 200. It's a little bit of a different body type than what Miami is currently bringing to the table with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill and obviously River Craycraft, who's been brought back, and our blueprint has Devin Duvernay. Like, you need a little bit more size. You get that with Malachi Corley. Now, McKinley Jackson, the defensive tackle, we mentioned briefly kind of his build. He came into the combine at 6'1.5", 34-inch arms, 326 pounds. Never really took the leap that you thought he could with the explosiveness and the athletic profile that he had. But still somebody who's played a lot. He's a multi-year captain at Texas A&M. He did play over the nose as a center, nose tackle quite a bit. And you see the leverage. And that was the thing when I saw him on the board. I'm like, man, this is such a Baltimore Ravens nose tackle type of player. And if you're going to run that scheme, the contrast of a 6'1" nose tackle at 326 versus a 6'7" nose tackle at 330, it's just a whole different physics game in there. And that got me really excited about that possibility. And that's what helped me spur, especially when you look behind him, there's not a lot of attractive nose tackle options in this class behind Tavondre Sweat and McKinley Jackson. So with him there in the late third round, I said, yeah, let's go get him. We mentioned Garendo and his explosive athletic profile. This is a bet on traits pick, right? And it's a 5th round draft selection. And he's coming in. He's going to be your 3rd running back at best because you do have Mostert and Achane under contract. So, but it's a nice flyer on some size. And that's the big difference with him and Chris Brooks, where I think Garendo gives you a nice leg up. Is Brooks is a nice player, but he went undrafted because he's not explosive. This is a 4'3" player at 220 pounds. You kidding me? Jerry Jones, competition for the cornerback room. Torrey Taylor, we mentioned, you're drafting to be a starting center or a starting punter, not center. We don't want to put the punter at center. It only happens at Madden, right? And then you obviously have Tip Ryman, your 7th round developmental inline replacement tight end. I like the class a lot. And the thought process, I thought the board fell favorably. Some players that I missed out on that I was hoping not to. Troy Fatanu, offensive tackle, could play guard for you year one. Would be a Teron Armstead heir apparent at the University of Washington. Crushed the combine. Missed there. If Brock Bowers would have been there, even with Noah Fant, I'd have entertained it because you can move on from Durham Smythe relatively quickly. And obviously I did draft another tight end. I would love to see more 2 tight end stuff that works for Miami, but you need a right blend of that for that to happen. I would have considered a number of pass rushers at 21. Jared Verse, probably first on that list for me personally. I know a lot of people like Laiatu Latu. I like Laiatu Latu. I think he's got the best pass rush tape. But Verse, it's that heavy-handedness that you want to complement what else you have. And there was Quinyon Mitchell, corner. I think he's probably going to go top 10 predictably. If he'd have been there at 21, I'd have ran that card in. That dude's a stud. An absolute stud. Height, weight, speed, checks all the boxes. Can play any kind of coverage you want out there. And then Jackson Powers Johnson was not there either. Now, there's more names on that list, so I don't want to give it away a whole future show's worth here. But those were kind of where my eyes were at as I came into the process. So let's talk a little bit about what the projected lineup looks like through the draft with the offseason blueprint that I've put together in my proposal in trying to project player values as best as you possibly can. Obviously, in mock draft, there's a ton of unpredictability around what players are going to be available, the feasibility of trades. I get all that, guys. I'm just doing the best I can with the tools that we have to put the best roster together that we possibly can with the resources the team has available, which is the whole spirit of the 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint. So projected starters pre-June 1st in my model. And all this could still happen. You may see Jerome Baker on this list still. Obviously, he was cut on Tuesday. I heard they do have an offer on the table, though, for him to come back to if his market does not end up being what he ultimately would like to find for himself. Starting offensive group, I have the Dolphins in 21 personnel. This is their best players. Obviously, if you are in true 21 personnel, you probably have Alec Ingold on the field. The Dolphins ran a ton of 21. They ran more 21 on 1st and 10 than anybody else in the league last year. But that involves Alec Ingold. Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback. Running backs, Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane. Your 2 best backs I have listed here. Your 2 best wide receivers are Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Backup players behind them, Ezukanma and Corley as big body types with versatility who can win down the field. I have Noah Fant and Durham Smythe at tight end and a projected starting offensive line of Teron Armstead, Marquise Hayes, Aaron Brewer, Damian Lewis, and Austin Jackson. Mentioned the different body types inside, but I've got two adequate level starters in Lewis and Brewer that were free agent signings and a second-round rookie that I think can really play. And again, we brought back Kendall Lamb. We have Liam Eichenberg as a utility player, and we brought back Isaiah Wynn as well. So we'll do a full 53-man roster projection and then talk about 2025 cap outlook tomorrow. That's tomorrow's show. But those are your key players on offense. Your defense, your starting front would have Phillips and Chubb when healthy. Your backups behind them, which will be important early in the year, is rookie Darius Robinson and Andrew Van Ginkel. Zach Sealer, probably going to be your penetration type player. And then your nose, McKinley Jackson. Still would like to add here. We'll also get into June 1st and opening up another $18 million in space and talk about some potential June 1st type additions. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm going to know what free agents are available. They're going to be available in June in reality. So there will be like some mystery squares that are added to the 53-man roster projection of, hey, I want to add a post-June 1st player in this position room. And spoiler alert, interior defensive line is going to be one of those spots. because you'd have Sealer, McKinley, Jackson, Fali Fatukasi. If you find me one more, it's like, all right, I feel like I can go to war with this group. Your starting linebackers for me were David Long and Jerome Baker. Reminder, I had Jerome Baker taking a contract extension. Sounds like the Dolphins tried to get Baker to work on a contract extension, but they couldn't figure out the dollars, so they cut him for the cap space up front. Your starting secondary, Jalen Ramsey, Cam Smith is going to have to step into a starting role. It's a second-round pick last year, performed well every time you had a chance to see him. He's going to have to be a player. Kader Kohu in the nickel. Would like to think a scheme change would benefit Kohu with how unpredictable he was last year. And then safeties, Javon Holland and Deshaun Elliott. Bringing back Deshaun Elliott is one of the expiring contracts for Miami this year. So you see quite a bit of blue just off of those projected starters. Blue on my index key is quality starters and roster cornerstones. I've got roster cornerstones for Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, Jalen Ramsey, Javon Holland, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb. Obviously, the availability of some of those guys early on is in question. I get that. But then quality starters, I got David Long, I got Zach Sealer, I got Tron Armstead, I've got Tua Tagovailoa, I've got Raheem Mostert, and then adequate starters is Noah Fant. And I think there's ceiling to tap into in this scheme for him to be a quality starter. Austin Jackson, Damian Lewis, and Aaron Brewer on the interior as adequate level starters that in this scheme, I think could transcend and become quality starters. Devon Achane, Kader Kohu, Deshaun Elliott. Your only real unknown, incomplete evaluation, you really don't know what you have, is Cam Smith. I feel like it's a pretty competitive team. At least in my eyes. Maybe you disagree. If you do, make sure you let me know. Comment, reply, like if you're on YouTube. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. I'm Kyle Krabs. I'm out of here for the day. Appreciate you guys checking off the offseason blueprint. I appreciate you guys for listening or watching Locked On Dolphins. Fins up. I got one more coming this week. At least maybe we'll get some major news and we'll do the emergency podcast because I'm sure we will. Why would we not? But you have all that to look forward to. Keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. I'm out of here. Fins up.